Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this monthly in-depth ag forecast brought to you by AgSouth and Ag Carolina Farm Credit. All right, since we talked a month ago, we were anticipating better moisture returning to parts of the southeast, and it certainly did. Parts of Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, northern Florida did receive decent precip, and we even got some moisture into parts of North Carolina. But if you look over that entire 1 month time frame over which it's been since we've last talked, we are still dealing with a lot of North Carolina, Virginia, and mid-Atlantic drought issues. In fact, the entire region is on the drought monitor here. And we still have this corner of Florida going into Georgia and South Carolina that is up there in the extreme, almost to the exceptional stages of drought, despite better rains as of late. I want to show you a couple things here. We come over to, let's go to data and time series. I'm going to flip this over to geographic regions, and let's go have a look at the southeast. So we're just kind of looking here from the year 2000 to now to kind of gauge the severity of the current drought we're in, despite better rains as of late, but to gauge the current drought we're in against historical numbers. And what we're going to do at the end of this is we're going to look at the newest forecast for El Niño. We're going to talk about other factors in both the Atlantic and the Pacific and try to give us a better outlook out there towards summer and just question whether or not we're going to see this area being reduced. Because right now we are at 100% coverage in some stage of drought across the AgSouth and Ag Carolina territory. Okay, but it's the depth of the drought that we're concerned about. If you have a look at the latest soil moisture map, it can really show you the pockets in South Carolina, then the majority of North Carolina, Virginia, up through the mid-Atlantic that still has significant deficits. One important thing is we've seen improvement in the soil moisture overall to your west. So should we be bringing flow from the Gulf into this region, it will at least be going over ground that has more moisture in it and vegetation that has more moisture in it. The worst thing would be to have drought in this area, deep drought in this area, no soil moisture, and therefore this would take any available Gulf moisture before it could get to us over here in the Carolinas. Now, that's just one part of the equation of figuring out how this moisture is going to get to us. As we continue to dissect what this may look like, I'm just going to jump way ahead and give you one forecast here. It comes from our Climate Prediction Center, and their current forecast for the drought outlook from June 1 all the way to August 31st is that they are keeping significant portions of Virginia and North Carolina on the drought monitor. Now, they're suggesting improvement farther to the south, okay, and maybe even some drought removal that could happen. I'm going to make the case that when you get into summer, it's very difficult to remove widespread drought. Why? Because your precipitation is falling as thunderstorms, which are hyper-local vessels for delivering rainfall, right? They don't spread rainfall over everybody. They have local pockets of heavy rain, and then they move quickly, so that becomes a bit of a challenge. But I wanted you to see this, and at the end, we're going to take a deeper dive into the longer-range forecast, okay? All right, bigger picture right now, the setup in the middle part of the country is that we're going to soak pockets of the Corn Belt and watch storm chances increase as we go forward in time. Now, this is just a 7-day forecast that gets us out there to the 17th of June. And what I wanted to point out is that those of you that are growing corn and soybeans, we are seeing really good moisture return to some places that need it heading into the critical month of July. And I'm going to point that out because seeing this much moisture just in a 7-day forecast is going to be viewed quite favorably as we go forward. On the backside of this, where we're drier, we had plenty of storms lately. Even Nebraska started to work its way out of its terrible drought. We've had storms that have gone through the northern plains, upper Midwest multiple times in the last couple of weeks. Now, if we just kind of take a closer look here, let's just zoom in on our region and get some numbers out of the WPC. You know, there's widespread chances for a ½ inch, maybe even up to an inch of total precipitation. But as I said, the setup is pretty potent to be delivering storms, so locally heavy rain. Now, where does that setup come from? Well, the real axis of the Bermuda High is here. All right, there it is. But there is another area of high pressure, which we could consider part of the Bermuda High, that is currently nosing its way here on June 10th into the southeast. So all of this flow is coming around, setting up for a lot of severe weather here. But deeper in the atmosphere, what I do like about this is that jet stream level flow is attempting to push through and get rid of this big arching ridge and bring in our chances of showers and storms as we go forward in the forecast. And I'm going to show what it looks like. We've got some new fun tools on AgWeather. By the way, where do you find this? If you go to agweather.com, AgWeather, just spell it out there, and then you come over to Weather Models, you now have this option to use what's called our Pro Viewer. Now, everybody, it's free, is able to use the Pro Viewer. But we did a little bit of extra work, and for our pro subscribers, these are folks that want to subscribe to the website, we have this new compare tool. If you click on that, you can now see any of our global models side by side. You pick your panels. But we added another feature. What if you want to stick with one model but see different variables? If you do that, it's like you choose the left model and the right model to be the same. Now you can choose, well, I maybe want to look at, let's go to vorticity, 500 millibar vorticity. And on the other side, I want to see precipitation type and intensity, which is where it was when it started. Now you can see multiple layers of the atmosphere and how they interact. So watch this. The bigger wave I'm keeping an eye on is this guy right here. And out ahead of it, there are some chances of getting some showers and storms more toward the mid-Atlantic. But as this wave sweeps its way through the Great Lakes, what we're going to be watching is behind it, now watch this, a larger area of colder air in this low pressure establish itself. It's right there. And that front, as we go past the end of this weekend and out into next week, sags over our area. Now, why is that important? Well, we've now brought a lifting mechanism here by drawing this trough into this part of the country, and the Bermuda high is still pumping. And as a result, we're going to see these better chances of rain starting to improve after the 14th, 15th, 16th. And that's why we're looking out there, a week from now, maybe even farther, the 17th through the 20th, chances for moisture to get in as the big ridge moves back to the west. Now, out ahead of this, we've got some severe weather, and the Storm Prediction Center website has been getting hammered today because of all the severe weather. Let's see if it'll load back up today's map. Boy, look at that. Well, I've got this on my own site because I'm always worried that sometimes those websites get really hammered. But if you come over here and click on SPC Outlooks, there it is. So there's where we're watching today. Scattered storms today here, but the real severe weather threats in the Midwest. Tomorrow looks like this, and there you go. Virginia, North Carolina, chances for some storms. And then day 3, it's still here. So let's get in and have a look at it by going to our high-resolution rapid refresh model. And we're going to pick this up right about the time I'm recording, which is when some storms are moving through parts of West Virginia into Virginia. Okay. As we go through the day, storms in Virginia, scattered storms possible in North Carolina, but not a whole lot going on today on Wednesday. Getting into Thursday, we're going to keep an eye out to our west just to see if we can get some more isolated and scattered storms in place. And sure enough, by Thursday evening, we start to see the chances beginning to improve for some of those storms. They're going to be isolated and locally heavy in their rainfall, but we're hitting Virginia, North Carolina, 2 of our driest spots as of late. Now, this forecast model, it's called the HRRR, H-R-R-R, only goes out to 48 hours. So this barely took us to early Friday morning. We got to look at some bigger model forecast to see beyond that. So here's what you can do. I have side by side the ECMWF and the GFS. You've kind of already seen what the atmosphere is going to be doing, but if we zoom in here, we can now see side by side how the models are adding up precipitation. Now we know that through the next week it's only scattered storms, but right now the European model has got relatively widespread chances of grabbing maybe up to an inch. Drier in South Carolina and pockets of Georgia. There's the GFS. But starting next week when the front sags through, look, we're beginning to see increasing chances of rainfall. And I think I can take this out to about a 10-day forecast to have a good look at it. There are major model differences right here in South Carolina as an example. And by the way, if you want to see those differences, click on difference. And now it will make a map which will show you the difference. So it's the European minus the GFS. So the European being drier in here is shaded in blue. The GFS being, where it's wetter, it's shaded in red. See how that's how we have that set up. So these are just all new tools at your disposal. But let's take a little bit different look at this. I'm going to go to weatherbell.com, one of my favorite sites, in addition to my own. Let's look at the European ensemble. Let's take it back to the 0Z run from today. And I'm going to just go have a look at some probabilities. Let's stay on the dry side of it. This is the chance it's staying under a ½ inch. And you know that through the next 5 to 7 days, outside of the isolated thunderstorms, we are drier. But as we go beyond that, we're going to see that all fade. Do you see how it went away? It's like 5 days, by day 10, it's gone. And that's where we start to see the probabilities of getting an inch of rain beginning to increase. So again, next 5 days, it's low. But beyond that, into week 2, we start to see improved chances of getting more moisture as the pattern evolves in a way that helps out. And this is what it is. About 7 days from now, a ridge begins to build in the west. That's the European solution. Here's the GFS. See the ridge? So the jet stream does this, and it squeezes the atmosphere right in through there. And that is our region where we're going to have where fronts are going to be forming. And what we're going to be watching is to see how long that trough lasts there, because the longer we can get it to stick around, the better the chances are of better and better rainfall. I see that by the solstice on the 21st, we've regained some sort of western trough feature, and the flow starts to do something like this. But the majority of week 2 is wetter. Let me show it to you. Here's the next 7 days, and as I click this, we're going to knock off one day and add another. So this is now June 11th through the 17th. It's the 12th through the 18th. And here you can see that week 2 right there, 14th through the 20th, chance of getting better and better moisture. Now, I got the GFS on the right and the European on the left. But the farther out we take it, what we're going to just be paying attention to is which model hangs on to the above average precipitation the longest, because we need every drop out of this, okay? And that's just part of this equation. There's more to it than just that. As it stands early this morning here on Wednesday, as I'm getting this recorded, let's get an update here from the National Weather Service. There it is. We do still have the heat advisories to our north. We've got flood watches out through parts of the Midwest, red flag warnings in place for the Great Intermountain West, the Four Corner States, parts of the Great Plains. We're doing okay. We just have one area down here where there's the severe thunderstorm warning. In fact, let's go have a look at that real quick. If we just zip over here, coming into North Carolina. That's interesting. Let's go to the high-res radar and have a quick look. We'll choose Raleigh. I'm going to see what's coming in on the radar here. So let's get this playing. There we go. And there's our severe thunderstorm warning up farther to the north in Virginia. I'm just trying to see if any of these storms, these isolated storms, are working their way through. Please feel free to use this. This is completely free on our website to use. So that's what we've got going on kind of right now. Temperature-wise, honestly, since the beginning of June, we've been cooler. All the heat's been tucked away in the mid part of the country where this big omega block has been set. So that's where the jet stream's been doing something like that with lows here in the big area of high pressure in that region. Well, we've now started to see that omega block begin to break down, and have a look at the temperatures now. This is Wednesday's highs compared to average. Well, here's Thursday. It's a very hot one for us over here on Thursday. Also hot up the mid-Atlantic and the East Coast. Friday's still a scorcher, but Saturday returning back toward normal. Sunday, Monday, we could stay in the mid-90s for a lot of this area. But early next week, when that big ridge builds over the west, we drop our temperatures back off. Now, I say I'm including a lot broader area. For most of this next week or so, we stay pretty toasty here with temperatures well into the 90s. If you want to see your individual forecast, don't forget you can always just go to local weather and let's just kind of drag the map over there and let's pick somewhere between Florence and Sumter right there. So what did I pick on? I picked on Lynchburg, and right now it's 90 degrees. Look at these temperatures. It's going to get hot, like I said. But we're watching to see if we go to the 15-day temperature as it builds up. We get a little bit of a break by the time we get into midweek next week. But we are now in that time period where it's hot and it's summer, and we've got to be prepared for what that's going to mean for us. Now, broader picture again. GFS is on the right, Europeans on the left. As I click play, what you're going to see is a 5-day sliding window of temperature. So this is the 10th through the 14th, the 11th through the 15th. See this? As we keep going, we finally squeeze some of that hot air out during the time period of the 15th through the 19th. We resume back with kind of normal temperatures overall. But we've got questions as to whether or not we come right back into the heat or not. Some of the models are trying to keep some of the above average temperatures around farther and farther into June. Now, bigger picture, okay, here's the next 7 days. That's week 2. So again, we still saw our warmer conditions. This is out there into week 3, still hotter than normal. And this is getting out into week 4. That would take you all the way up to July the 8th and beyond. Now, if you saw that, you're probably like, well, I see most of the heat is here. A little cooler where the monsoon might kick up, but a lot of heat running along the edge of this. And that is true. We definitely see that. But you want to know one of the big reasons why the models are keeping all of this warmth around to finish June? This is right where our driest areas are. And therefore, you're getting most of the sun's light going in and just beating on the ground, sensibly warming it, than evaporating soil moisture or excess moisture in our vegetation. But that's your forecast. I think as we get into the month of July, it's going to be a lot of heat west. We may be looking at more normal temperatures overall. What about precipitation? Well, this is the new forecast from June 26th to July 26th. And it is trying to keep a big section of the middle part of the country drier, suggesting that we have some sort of high pressure in this area. Now what that does is that excites the southwest monsoons. Storms tend to run over the top of it like this, and the Bermuda high tends to sit right over here, and it does this. So the net effect in the model is you're bringing in flow from two different directions, and they're keeping things wetter than average for us. Now, I'd love it if this forecast verified, but we need to dig a little deeper to see if there's more than just one model predicting that. And a lot of the digging we're going to have to do is to understand what is the interaction with things going on in the Atlantic and the Pacific, while the equatorial Pacific slides itself into what could be an historic El Niño event. Now, this is going to be our setup man for the rest of summer into fall and winter, which we're going to talk more about in a moment. But all of our major models right now are predicting at minimum a strong El Niño, more likely a super Niño, and possibly even an historic El Niño, meaning that the temperatures are above 3 degrees Celsius above normal, and that would be in unprecedented territory. So that's all the stuff we're going to be keeping an eye on. Now, if you go look at the southeast and say, well, what does El Niño mean to me? What I did was I ranked for June, July, and August all of your wettest years to your driest years. See that? So wettest are down here, like 2013, driest 1980. And then I color-coded the years that were neutral in gray. Blue is La Niña, and red is El Niño. And what you see here is that El Niños don't necessarily mean one thing or the other. In fact, statistically, your summer precipitation pattern is really no different if you have El Niño or La Niña. It's a non-factor. And it's when it's neutral that the biggest variance tends to happen. And that's always due to stuff that's going on in the Atlantic in addition to the Pacific. Now, the rest of the way across the country, we have a little bit different story, but not so much here. So we got to remember this. You're going to hear a whole lot of meteorologists barking about El Niños and going on and on. In summer, I don't think we can use it as a strong predictor. Okay, that just to be completely honest with you. Now, this El Niño is the fastest developing El Niño on record. In other words, coming out of La Niña back in February and already being up there close to 1.6 degrees C above average is impressive. And there is a lot of warm water still waiting to upwell and come to the surface here to take this El Niño to what could be historic levels. When I looked back over time, though, I started to find where, okay, if you look at this, all of that warm water is going to come up right here. We call this the eastern side of the Pacific. I went back and I said, well, when have we had big east-based El Niños? And it gave me a list of years. And what's interesting is July through September, a lot of the anomalously drier conditions we had was because of the underperforming hurricane season, which we've talked at length about. We tend to be quite stormy in this corridor, and it's mixed across parts of the southeast with a slight drier bias overall. Now, when you think about it, though, I'm like, look, that's an El Niño forecast. I'm using El Niño years to find that. And what I did is tell you, El Niño is not the dominant signal. So while we're watching this so carefully, I need to understand what this cool, warm, cool setup is here. And on this side of North America, this cooler stripe with very, very warm water there. What do they do? Are they more strongly correlated? Well, let's start off in the Pacific. If the Northeast Pacific goes warm, which it is doing, we don't really have a strong signal, wet or dry. See that? What I will tell you, though, is that the Midwest into the Northeast has a very strong wet signal. So again, what are we talking about? If this goes warm, very warm, which it's been trending warmer and warmer each week, okay? Talking about this area, we tend to see this precipitation pattern. It's not a problem for us overall. If it goes cool, this whole region tends to go over very, very dry. But again, we don't see a strong correlation across AgSouth and AgCarolina territory. So what do we watch instead? Well, this graphic represents the ocean temperature behavior in the Atlantic. And it's looking specifically at the ocean temperature pattern associated with the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. And for a very long time, we had negative values back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And now we've come up here. And this has also been correlated with our hurricane season. Now, originally, I did a correlation with Midwest precip when I made this graphic. I just want you to see the top one here. What I want you to see next is this. When the Atlantic goes over very warm, we tend to have a lot of isolated storms. But when it goes over cool, we tend to get very, very wet right into this part of the Carolinas and all the way down to southern Georgia as well. Very peculiar setup that has to do with the fact that the ocean, where did I put it, has this cool, warm, cool setup. It all has to do with the position and strength of the Bermuda High, pushing more moisture in like this, not necessarily bringing it through the Gulf. See what we're doing here? And we're going to be watching to see in July, in August, in September, where that Bermuda high is going to set up and how well it's going to kind of adhere to this idea. Now, we still have models to look at, though. And this is the June ocean temperature pattern. Now we're getting out there to July, August, September, October. And what do we see as we go forward? The cooler water goes away here. We have an east-based El Niño, cool water there, not blazing hot in the main development region, but warm tucked in the middle. And what the model's attempting to do with this particular pattern as it builds this huge El Niño event, is if you come into the continental United States and then click on the seasonal precipitation anomalies. No, hang on, let's go back. This is what it has for June, July, August. That's July, August, September, and August, September, October. Long story short, while we may still struggle with drought in early summer, the farther we go into summer, the greater the chances are of us having more wetter weather, and likely not coming from a big hurricane season. In fact, let's just keep going with this, but if you don't mind, I'm going to flip my view to the Atlantic Basin. Now you can see all of it. August, September, October is expected to not have a lot of tropical systems forming here. They may be more homegrown here, or come out of the middle of the Atlantic, because I still think the ocean temperatures are warm enough here to support tropical cyclone development. But then September, October, November, December, all of those are pointing toward a wetter situation for much of the southeast as we go into fall and then winter. And you need to be preparing for this and thinking about this, how this is going to affect your decision making at that time. But it's not just this model that's predicting it. I've got several models that are showing it. This is the National Multi-Model Ensemble. Now, I'm only going to look right now at July, August, September. And again, late summer, better chances for storms here, but the hurricane season's likely going to be diminished a bit. Going beyond that, looking at August, September, October, again, see what we've got going on here? But wetter than average there. And that continues farther and farther into the winter months, or the fall and winter months. So I keep mentioning this hurricane season. I do want to give you the latest from Colorado State University. It's one that I trust. And in every category they have for measuring a hurricane season, averages numbers are here, the forecasts are here. And they're all below. They're all less than average. And one of the main culprits for this is just the size and strength of this El Niño, which is going to be shifting it back across the open Pacific, suppressing motion in this area. And the other fun thing to watch right now is this. Coming off the Sahara, we've currently got some dust. We saw a big dust plume a week ago, and over the next 10 days, there's quite a bit of it. We're going to have to watch to see how the dust impacts any tropical cyclone development as we go through the next, 3 to 4 months. So you've got my ideas now. We've seen where things are going. You know about the tools that we have on agweather.com. Go check them out, and hopefully it just becomes a better part of your overall decision-making as we go forward. Really appreciate your time. I'll talk to you again in July. Thanks.